Visualeconomik community. April 20th marked the first 100 days in office of the new tenant of the White House, Donald Trump. The first 100 days are usually a grace period, 3 months in which the president can do a little bit of whatever he wants, and people are not going to protest too much. This time, however, it was different. Trump has done what he wanted. What's more, he's already signed more executive orders than Franklin Delano Roosevelt himself at the height of the Great Depression. But this has not gone down well with the Americans. According to several polls, the president's popularity is plummeting, and he has already lost more than 10 points of support. It seems that the fact that filling the shopping cart is more expensive now, or that a good chunk of your pension is vaporized overnight, has not gone down too well with people. Still, the main criticisms of Trump are not economic. In fact, Americans' main reproach to their new president has to do with how he is flouting the rule of law and how he is handling international issues, such as the Ukrainian war. What's more, as we told you over on Visualeconomik, the discontent has already spread to the US Congress. Be that as it may, this is Visualeconomik. And yes, I know what you're thinking, another video about Trump's tariffs. But for this subject, the situation changes almost every day. You know, one day Trump approves historic tariffs. The next day he freezes them for 90 days to negotiate. But then they offer to negotiate and he stonewalls. Throughout this month, we'll be seeing if those 90 days of grace for most of the Liberation Day tariffs are going to end up with an agreement, or will the same story repeat itself as a few days ago with Canada and Mexico, and Trump will end up making good on his threats. The truth is that there are good arguments to believe in either of these two outcomes. On the one hand, foreign countries are not giving in as easily as the Republican administration had hoped, and there are already politicians very close to Trump who are calling for a reversal. But on the other hand, Trump has also talked about a new package of tariffs, and believe me, there's reason to believe that the Republican executive is already working to approve them. So today on Visualeconomik, we'll be telling you what the situation is today and how it may evolve. Let's summarize the current situation. You will all remember Trump's threats to Mexico and Canada. In early March, the Republican president imposed a 25% tariff on these countries, but only a 10% tariff on China. Later, on 2nd of April, these tariffs were extended to the rest of the world, with an almost universal 10% tariff. On the same day, Liberation Day, an economic nuke was announced. Tariffs of 10 to 40% on all other countries, even those inhabited only by penguins. And if that wasn't enough, another 74% was added for China. But the next day, Trump halted the Liberation Day tariffs for all countries except China. This is the situation we are in today, but pay attention because there is a new package in sight. A package of tariffs on lumber, copper, medicines, and, take note, also on semiconductors. If approved, the average tariff rate on US imports would be nearly 35%, 10 times higher than when the Orange Man came to the White House. And why do we know more tariffs are coming? Well, you don't have to be a fortune teller. The president himself is very clear about his intentions.
Trump says pharma tariffs will entice back drug production. We're going to be announcing very shortly a major tariff on pharmaceuticals.
But obviously, this is not all. We've already seen that Trump's word is less reliable than a website to watch free TV series that appear on the second page of Google. Now then, let me explain something to you. None of the tariffs in recent days have passed through Congress, which, in theory, is the body with authority over trade. Instead, Trump has used the superpowers that being president of the United States gives him to approve them by executive order. But of course, the US is not yet a banana republic, as much as Trump strives to make it one. The president cannot veto whatever he wants. There must be a justification of urgency and national security. In other words, Trump can only put tariffs on a decree basis if the Commerce Department issues a report saying that these tariffs are critical to the survival of the US. Now, as they say, the devil is in the details. Who controls the Commerce Department? That's right, Donald Trump. So in practice, this is more of a formality than anything else. The good thing is that it helps us to foresee what the next tariffs will be. What products is the Department of Commerce preparing a report on? Well, the ones we have already mentioned. Medicines, copper, semiconductors. We could even read things like this: a report on the critical role of timber in national security. Of course, the idea of such a tariff to protect the country is disproportionate. Timber could still make a modicum of sense, but we have to see how these investigations have included, hold on to your chairs, even children's stories. As if this were not enough, Secretary of Commerce Lutnick also recently said that a tariff will be applied to foreign automakers that manufacture cars in the United States. This is pure xenophobia applied to companies. In any case, we're not sure that these tariffs will be approved. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, every day there are more and more signs that the Trump administration is not very happy with how things are going, and on some issues it is already backpedaling. And what can I say? It's no wonder. According to a recent academic paper, this tariff war could cost the US as much as 0.5 percentage point of GDP, and that's just the initial impact. The most immediate negative effects could extend for more than a year, which could put the country on the brink of recession. And take note, here we're only taking into account the most immediate effects, such as the fact that the shopping basket is more expensive, or that American producers have to pay more to buy inputs abroad. But this work leaves out other fundamental issues. Take, without going any further, the brutal loss of confidence in the dollar that we told you about a few days ago. But this is not the only work on the subject. The International Monetary Fund has updated its report on global growth, and the results are sobering. In January, the agency forecast that the US would grow at almost 2.7%, but that figure has now dropped to 1.8%. But the worst thing is that no other country is spared. For example, Japan has lost 0.5 points of growth, and Canada 0.6. In short, a total disaster. Tariffs not only threaten to push the US into a recession, but to drag down the rest of the world with it. And pay attention, because these negative effects are going to happen despite news stories like this.
Canada's oil industry thrives despite Trump's trade war. Saturn Oil and Gas, Stampede Drilling, and Arrow Exploration are among the 100 most rapidly growing companies in the Americas.
Even if the US closes its doors to the rest of the world can try to live without the US. Indeed, this is exactly what they are trying to do. Still, the global economy is so interconnected that the transition will be far from easy. But hopefully, the Trump administration will come to its senses, and this transition will not be necessary. But just in case, the European Union is already in talks with China to liberalize trade in electric vehicles. Remember that just a couple of days ago, he put a 100% tariff on it. Trump has said several times that he is a big proponent of free trade, that he really wants no tariffs, and this is just a negotiating strategy. We already told you on this channel that this makes no sense, but he is right about one thing. Trump may have triggered free trade, but between blocs that leave out the US. And don't think this is a joke. In the last few days, we have seen a lot of news stories like this.
Japan to resist Trump efforts to form trade bloc against China.
Although there is nothing too official, everyone knows that the US wanted to force countries like Japan to decide their side in this war. And yes, they are doing so, but not necessarily on Uncle Sam's side. The occupant of the White House says world leaders are lining up to ask him for a treaty that he already has verbal agreements with, wait for it, 200 countries, even though there are only 195 recognized countries. Come on, Trump is such a good negotiator that he claims to have reached agreements even with countries that don't exist. Aside from this further display of Trump's extremely poor intellectual level in his typical statements, the reality is that the president has not even secured a single sad deal with Japan, one of his biggest allies. Some countries, such as Vietnam, have offered to eliminate some tariffs and regulations, but even these offers have not come to fruition. The most paradigmatic case is the European Union's offer to eliminate practically all mutual tariffs, but everyone knows that this was never going to come to anything. Something so significant would take decades to be signed. And, let's face it, that proposal would spend years in a drawer as soon as French farmers started protesting. In short, Trump's diplomatic efforts have been a failure. Even if we're honest, there has never been any diplomatic effort.
What does this administration exactly want? Do they want a new trade deal? Do they want tariffs? We just don't know.
But, Visualeconomik community, it doesn't end there. One of the most embarrassing scenes in recent days has been to see the Chinese Foreign Affairs spokesman flatly deny that Trump has had talks with Xi Jinping, or that there is even an open negotiation to reach an agreement on tariffs. It is true that China has halted some of its retaliation against the Americans, but this was a unilateral decision by Xi Jinping, not an agreement. In short, the US has shot itself in the foot with tariffs. The damage to its economy is unprecedented. Trump has caused a country that was advancing like a rocket to be in danger of recession, and all in exchange for absolutely nothing. The dollar sinking, the US debt through the roof. Even the cheap factories are not coming back to the US, and that was already a terrible objective. Apple, to give just one example, has reacted to the tariff war by moving its factories to India, not Detroit. And of course, there is no agreement of any kind with any country. All this explains why we are already seeing speeches like this one. Pay attention to the words of Scott Bessant, Secretary of the Treasury.
I wish to be clear. America first does not mean America alone. To the contrary, it is a call for deeper collaboration and mutual respect among trade partners.
If you are loyal followers of Visualeconomik, you already know Scott Bessant. What can I say? We've talked about him so much that he almost seems like family. But in case you don't know him, let me tell you that we are dealing with someone very Trumpist, obsessed with reindustrialization, trade deficits, and being the architect of the new global financial order. So yes, the Republican president's inner core is already talking about backtracking. Bessant himself has said that the situation with China and tariffs of over 100% is completely unsustainable. Of course, the Secretary of the Treasury is never going to admit that all this was a mistake. It was a masterstroke that we simply don't understand yet. But hey, if this excuse ends the trade war, we're not going to complain either, and the markets seem to feel the same way. Bessant has been a strong advocate of tariffs, but now raises a little white flag. So, when Bessant stars in the papers, the S&P 500 rises, and when other, even more radical advisors, such as Peter Navarro, do, then the market sinks. Which side will end up winning? We don't know, but luckily there are more clues that Trump doesn't plan to escalate the situation further. Do you want another example? Just listen to his statements about one of his greatest enemies, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell.
Trump calls for firing central bank chief for not lowering interest rates. Trump, no intention of firing Fed Chair Powell.
Trump wants to ramp up the deficit. Well, it's not that he wants to, it's just that he's doing it. Despite Elon Musk walking around with a chainsaw in true Javier Milei style, while the Libertarian president has cut about 15 points of fiscal and quasi-fiscal deficits in Argentina, the US federal government is spending more money than ever before in its entire history. And obviously financing all that deficit is not cheap, even less so with a public debt over GDP of 120%. For this reason, Trump wants Powell to lower interest rates. Well, for this reason, and because at this rate, the US economy is going to need a shot of monetary adrenaline to avoid going into recession. But of course, Powell has only two mandates: to take care of employment and inflation. Employment is at near record highs, so his main concern is inflation, which is not yet at the 2% target. Lowering rates would do the government a lot of good, yes, but it would trigger another run-up in prices, and Powell is convinced that avoiding this scenario is his number one concern. This is why he is so at odds with Donald Trump. The fact is that the Republican president has been insulting and threatening the Fed chairman for years, even threatening to fire him before his term officially ends. But in recent days, Trump has reversed his position and flatly denied that he wants him fired. Of course, we don't know if Trump is telling the truth or is simply saying these things to calm the markets. After all, the Fed's independence is one of the pillars of the US economy, and Trump's threats were doing a lot of damage to the US dollar and US debt. Be that as it may, what is clear is that there is a change in the discourse. We should not be too optimistic. At the beginning of April, it seemed that the tariffs on Canada and Mexico were going to come to nothing, and in the end, he opted to go all in. But at least there is reason for hope. From here, we will follow this issue in great detail to be able to inform you. And at this point, it's your turn. Do you think Trump is backpedaling? Will he strike a trade deal, or just go back to pre-Liberation Day tariffs? Or conversely, will Trump double down and threaten the world with even more tariffs? You can leave me your answers down in the comments. And as always, don't forget that here on Visualeconomik, we release new videos every week, so subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell so you don't miss any of our updates. If you like this video, like it, and I'll see you in the next one. All the best. See you soon.